Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Megan Secor. She is a Community Relations Manager at Stonington Institute. It is her first time on the show, and unfortunately a tough subject to discuss today, heroin, opiates, but she's an expert on the topic, and we thank you for being on the show, so welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Where to start? Where are we in general in society today? As you know, I do a radio show too, and I do the news in the morning, and I'm talking more and more about heroin overdoses, about Narcan being administered, and about the heroin epidemic, not just around here, but it seems like everywhere.
Yeah, I think it's a really tough topic for a lot of people, especially families who have addiction in their family and maybe friends, loved ones. I think the tougher reality is that this has been a problem for a really long time, and now it's targeting a slightly different demographic, which is getting more attention.
Is that why it's kind of out in the public eye a little bit more now?
Yeah, I mean, they're saying that the average heroin user is actually white, middle-aged, I'd say 18 to 35, white suburban male.
And not like an inner city homeless person or just an already addicted person and where you think of the low end of society. That's not the case.
We used to think of heroin addicts as, shooting up in dark urban alleys, and
Yeah.
it's no longer the case. I think because of the prescription painkillers leading to heroin use, the demographic has shifted, and so there are no socioeconomic bounds. People with college degrees are suffering from addiction. People who don't even have a high school diploma are suffering. So it's really a disease that affects everybody.
And you touched on a key point there. When you might have thought of heroin as it's a recreational drug. It's for drug users. What happens though is you get on heroin from starting with regular prescribed painkillers, and you sort of work your way into that. Talk about that.
Yeah, actually, legislation was just passed or hoped to be passed going to the Senate. The House of Representatives decided to put a 7-day cap on opioid prescriptions, most opioid prescriptions, which will kind of hopefully reduce that, the heroin usage off of painkillers. I think the tougher part for medical professionals is to know what the pain threshold is. Does someone actually need the prescription narcotic or don't they? And that being said, you go to Hartford, and once you're on prescription painkillers for a certain amount of time and you have that addictive genetic disposition, I guess, to have the disease of addiction or struggle with it, then all of a sudden you're going from, being prescribed pills to no longer being prescribed pills to paying $80 on the streets of Hartford for, pills, and then not having that money. So you're going to $4 a bag for heroin, which is significantly cheaper for the average addict. And
it's real scary. Is there a psychological aspect where the way you get addicted, and not even getting to the heroin part, but just on the narcotic painkiller, the prescription, if you try to kind of ease your way off of it, somehow the pain comes back more severe? Not really, but maybe psychologically, and that's how you one of the ways you can kind of get yourself addicted?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer that, 50% is genetics. I mean, you are genetically predisposed to having the disease of addiction. It's not just that nature versus nurture. Sometimes it's just in you. My family, personally, it's me and my brother have never tried a drug. I don't think either of us have even smoked a cigarette. And then you have my cousin, my two cousins, boy and a girl, and my girl cousin is never tried a drug, and my boy cousin is a 7-year heroin addict.
Right.
So I think someone eventually, and I think this is a concept that families really have to understand, is that, I think a lot of times parents or families will be, they think, what did I do wrong?
Right. Blame themselves for it.
Absolutely.
I could have done something different. But you're kind of only sheltering them a little bit more that way, and who knows what could happen. You have to let someone live their life, and sometimes the decisions they make, they have to learn a hard lesson.
Absolutely, right? And sometimes you just pull that short straw. I'm a firm believer that any four of the cousins could have pulled that short straw. Unfortunately, it was my cousin, and he is still struggling with that disease of addiction. I think, for me, I was explained it like this once. If I went into a bar and had 2 drinks, I could put down that second glass of wine with it half full and I could leave. Never think about it again. And my cousin said, Megan, I would think about that half full glass of wine for weeks that you didn't drink it. So that's the average thought process of what an addict kind of goes through, is that struggle to not be able to say.
The only reason I would think about it is because I paid for it. and I'd be mad that I just left. But I hear what you're saying. The other thing that I found very interesting, and this is true, almost you mentioned a relative and yourself never touched drugs, others who have. Everybody, no matter who you are, in any walk of life in society, wherever you are, you either know somebody or you have a connection to either a relative or a friend that might have some kind of addiction. It's that widespread.
Absolutely.
And you, interestingly, someone who has never done drugs, ended up being a community relations manager for Stonington Institute, where people are rehabbing.
Yes.
How did that happen? I want to get into your background a little bit.
Yes. So I was already kind of passionate about it, just because when my cousin first started going through all this, he actually went to Ender's Island and broke out of Ender's Island, got drunk off the priest's holy wine, stole a car. And at the time, my brother and I thought it was funny. We were like, oh, he's so resourceful, And then you kind of later begin to understand
it was a bad thing.
That it was this thing that, we always thought, oh, well, he's such a good kid. He just must have got a little drunk and made a lot of stupid decisions. But then it was this full-blown problem within our family. And then how did we help? How do we help from the outside? How do we help my aunt and uncle? And how do we ultimately help him? So I was already passionate about the cause, I guess, before. And then I had the opportunity to work at Stonington, and I sat in on the program, and it's amazing. So it was a no-brainer for me to want to be a part of that. And it's a position that I get to make a positive change every day, serve on the community care team around here, which is, representatives from the hospitals, the shelters. They have them across the towns in Connecticut and Rhode Island, and they do amazing work.
And you probably feel a sense of satisfaction or gratitude knowing that you're helping to change a person's life. You might, whether indirectly or directly, be saving a person's life.
Yeah,
right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's so important is that there's so many levels of this. There's, the family element level. There's education. I mean, I'm a big part of Shine a Light on Heroin.
Tell me what that is.
Yep. So Shine a Light on Heroin is really just a community hub to raise awareness, kind of garner community support for the opioid crisis, and to just try to figure out solutions as a team. So Jim Spellman kind of founded that, and Krista Quattromani, she's a mental health clinician at L&M, has been an amazing force behind, really advocating for changes throughout the community on the most basic level with the heroin crisis, but also, educating, getting into the schools, going into the high schools, and kind of speaking to the effect of, what the threat of addiction really is to kids. She really pulled me in and got me involved in it, and it's really education on the topic. That's really what the group is surrounded upon. I think that people don't understand it, and so we kind of help. We meet once a week to kind of discuss how we can really get it out into the community and how we can give people the tools, resources to kind of help each other and themselves. So, we've been going into the high schools. Some of the high schools have invited us in with open arms to kind of talk about the epidemic to the kids, which is so important.
And it's important to get it early at that young age, right?
Absolutely. It's we joke about how we had DARE. Right. And I think DARE works to some extent, but the goal of what we do in the schools is to really hit them with the truth. I mean, we're unfiltered. We are just very direct about the epidemic, and a little bit hoping to instill that fear in them of trying it, because unfortunately some of them will try it and have no problem, and some of them will try it and face a life struggle of dealing with the addiction that they're going to have.
And so people might be surprised that it actually is starting that early in the school level, school age.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and how are they getting a hold of it?
A lot of times it's their parents or grandparents' cabinets. They're going in those cabinets and thinking they can take one Xanax or one opioid, and they feel a little temporary relief. You also see a lot of young athletes that are going through it. They get a rotator cuff surgery or some type of medical condition that they start taking it, and all of a sudden they feel so good on it that they keep the process kind of going even after they're.
Yeah, a lot of athletes get addicted to the painkillers, and also they have to deal with nowadays the performance enhancing drugs that is such a stigma in society now too. So it's almost like a double whammy for them.
Yeah, we definitely hit the young athletes. That's definitely a passion of mine. I mean, you see CrossFit, you see yoga instructors, you see all these different, where before we would have thought, oh, that person would never do heroin. I mean, they're partying off of this drug now, and it's no longer just something that they're taking for pain or shooting up in their veins like they were in the 70s and 80s. I mean, they're starting on a very base level of just taking a pill, just like we would take Advil, and then going into more and more of that usage and eventually becoming too expensive.
What has happened very recently where there's such an upsurge, it's such an epidemic, and we're talking about it in the news all the time, and we're having this show because of it? What happened recently, especially with that heroin specifically, or opiates in general, really, because you got to include the prescription pain medications too. So what happened all of a sudden?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the number of overdoses increased drastically. I know that in 2013 there was about 400. And now there's about 720, 25 this year. In 2015, obviously 2016, New London County, we got hit pretty hard. I think the heroin is being mixed with other things such as fentanyl, and I think, unfortunately, the access to prescription painkillers is a big cause of that. I think it's becoming more accepted at a younger age because of the prescription, painkillers, that they're thinking that they can take these drugs and never become heroin addicts. And you'll find a lot of times that that's what they say. They're like, well, we started with prescription painkillers or oxys or Percocets, and never did we think that eventually, you're going to use heroin. And then, I mean, I've had countless people in the community who are in recovery themselves say that they never started with the intention of ever using a needle, but that's eventually where it goes.
Are you surprised at how many people you know personally that almost take the Percocet or the Xanax or any of that stuff almost like candy, and it's so easy to get prescriptions, to get another prescription for it, and it's like a chronic thing? Do you always, why aren't you kind of easing yourself off of this a little bit? But so many people I know are taking so much of the painkillers.
I can only speak from personal experience, and that's, I got my wisdom teeth out and took painkillers, and I felt so nauseous and sick. I was like, oh, never again.
Right.
But I think on the flip side, I'm a smaller percentage that feels that way, and I think the bigger percentage feels euphoria. You just feel like, oh my God, I'm Superman. My body feels great. I feel great. I'm feeling just light and good and healthy. But the reality is, once you stop using, or that you're coming down off that high, then you're feeling like you want more of it.
So after the heroin epidemic, now all of a sudden a potential, not cure, but help for the problem would be Narcan. A lot of talk about Narcan. A lot of municipalities are providing it to their EMTs and doctors, and sometimes even police. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the bill was just passed, or hopefully going to the Senate by the House of Representatives, saying that all first responders are now going to use and carry Narcan with them.
What is Narcan? So
Narcan basically reverses the effect of an overdose. So it stops the opioid receptors in your brain. A lot of times people think, okay, you're Narcan, you're all set. You still have to go to the hospital. Sometimes, depending on how much you've used, you need 2 doses of Narcan. But it really is to save lives, and I think you see the commentary on articles and the debate on it now is that you're giving people this tool to, it's like giving kids condoms in high school, almost like, go ahead and...
It's like encouraging it because there's a fix, you know what I mean,
right,
with the heroin.
But I think that the deeper reality in my belief is that it saves lives. It gives a second opportunity or a third or a fourth, and it doesn't matter how many opportunities are there if a life is saved and there's just a chance for them to find recovery. And if you have people who pass away because of an overdose, or you have people that may use Narcan however many times but then finally find recovery, then they have the opportunity to help other people. For me personally, Narcan's a beautiful thing, and I think that the community in general should embrace.
As we go to the break and come back, we got a lot more to get to, by the way. You want to steer people to the Facebook page for the Shine the Light on Heroin, and you just do a search for that on Facebook? Is that what you do?
Yep, Shine a Light on Heroin and Community Speaks Out. Both are wonderful organizations. Community Speaks Out is more helping people find treatment centers and helping families, and Shine a Light on Heroin is more educational topics and really just digging our roots into the local community and shining a light on the issue.
Yeah, and using social media as opposed to just a regular website. People, that's where people are. They're on social media. They can share, they can like, they can be a support, for somebody else. So definitely do the search on Facebook and go check it out. We'll take a short break and come back. Megan Secor is a community relations manager for Stonington Institute. We will be right back. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Stay there. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest, Megan Secor, Community Relations Manager for Stonington Institute. And unfortunately, we're talking about a subject that it needs attention. It's a problem. Opiate addiction, heroin, you name it, painkillers, and there's still a lot to get to. One question I had was, how is insurance handling this issue for people? Starts out with your garden variety prescribed painkiller. Insurance is covering that, and do they cover it to the point of once you get into the rehab aspect, if that's necessary too?
Yeah, I think when I think depending on what insurance you have, there's multi-levels of treatment options. So first you start at detox usually. If you have an overdose and you're looking to find recovery, detox kind of rids your body of those physical effects of opioids, and then you'll step down into intensive residential or intensive outpatient, partial hospital programs, outpatient programs that kind of, you don't per se live there, but you do participate in programs, let's say Monday through Friday, 9 to 3, or evening programs, or whatever kind of fits your schedule to kind of find the underlying issues of why, you are addicted, maybe the mental health that's going on underneath, and ways to kind of self-help techniques to stay in recovery for as long as possible. As far as the insurance goes, the state insurance actually is really great in terms of covering treatment. They do cover detox, and they do cover IOP, PHP, and outpatient levels of care. Sometimes, unfortunately, you have to fail those treatment programs before you will be covered for the residential level of treatment. And commercial insurances are obviously, it depends on what insurance you have, what's covered, whether it's in, 28-day out-of-state or an in-state rehabilitation program.
Did the Affordable Care Act change as far as coverage and how people can utilize it for things of this nature as far as treatment and things?
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the Affordable Care Act, but I do know that the average Husky state insurance, anyone who's covered under that really does get a really solid level of treatment coverage. So I know that a lot of times commercial insurances will cover 3 to 4 weeks of care, and state insurances can cover 6 weeks of care. So I think I think they're recognizing the problem and maybe developing the length of treatment you get off of that.
One thing that doesn't get talked about too much is we talked about the person that's addicted and falling into the situation that they're in, but all equally affected in other ways is the people around them, whether it be family, friends, co-workers. It becomes their problem too, and and they suffer in a way and have to deal with it, even if it's trying to help the individual, right?
Absolutely. I think there are a lot of groups that have been around for a long time to help families, but newer groups are starting to kind of really just dig their roots in with the family, whether it's an intervention specialist or local groups like Community Speaks Out. Tammy and Joe Delacruz have done a great job kind of digging their heels in, recognizing it as a family disease, and really offering support groups at Groton Public Library and speaking. And obviously just connecting with the families on a one-to-one level, just saying, okay, hey, being almost like a concierge for where their loved one should go for treatment, or making recommendations behind that, because I think it's a really hard disease to understand, and there's a lot of components of it, and so having a support group or help group to call is important.
Other ways the general population can help, they see it, what can they do?
I know that Governor Malloy was proposing to cut $16 million in mental health and addiction services. So I think it's really important as a community to, write letters of opposition to your local legislators, senators, state reps, to kind of say, hey, this is going to cost us as a state more money in the long run if we make those cuts now. So I think that's a way the general population can help, and also I think having an open heart and an open mind to the disease of addiction. I mean, for some people, this is their cancer or their diabetes or whatever disease. I mean, this is something that they struggle with. And I think, with substance abuse is most of the time underlying mental health, which is just as serious as some physical health conditions. So I think for the general population, the way they can help is to be supportive and open, and encourage their family members and their friends to get rid of the pharmaceuticals or the prescription opioids in their cabinets. That's one way to help. And just to be supportive. I mean, as a community, I think it's just a really important thing to all be supportive of what each individual aspect of the addiction services is trying to do for the client at the end of the day.
Now, I know you're not a doctor, but one person from my staff asked this question. Once you're on heroin, you get to that point, and you started with painkillers. Once you're on heroin, how do you know that you're using it for the pain or for the sensation of getting high? And how can you tell? Tough one, I know.
I think a lot of the times, and I'm not
Right.
an MD, if I'm on a prescription painkiller for a certain amount of time and then I stop, I feel sometimes physical withdrawal symptoms, which thinks, psychologically, I think I'm still sick or I'm still in pain, when really the pain is directly caused from, coming down off that prescription opioid high. So I think it's very tough sometimes for people to realize if they still need it for pain management or if they are addicted and coming off of that and having withdrawal symptoms because of that. And I think that's where, I think the doctors and APRNs, and they are facing a lot of, even hospitals, they're facing a lot of under speculation, under a microscope about, prescribing, the heroin on a bottle. But obviously, I'd say 99% of doctors go into the field to help people, not to hurt people. So I think that's a very fine line of being able to determine who needs it for pain management and who really doesn't. And there's systems being put in place now where you'll be able to track if you were prescribed this across the state and then you were prescribed it here. I can see that you probably don't need a second or a refill on that. So everyone really is working together to make sure that what your question is lessened, actually.
Are there we've been talking a lot about opiates and heroin, painkillers. Is there anything that, from your perspective, as far as what you work with, that's like kind of under the radar that we haven't talked about because all of our time is being occupied by heroin in society now?
I think definitely, Shine Light and Heroin was created really because of this opioid crisis. I do think, though, that addiction across the board, whether it's alcohol or marijuana or K2 or any of those things, I think what the community and providers as a whole, working collaboratively, is to recognize that it's mental health. It's underlying mental health. So what can we do as a community with our kids, with our families, with our mothers, fathers, to kind of recognize, hey, this is a mental health issue. How can we get to the underlying root so that the substance abuse is a little bit easier to handle?
All right. Let's take one more break. Come right back. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Stay right there. So that is our show for today. We learned a lot, and there's certainly more that people can learn, and just be aware. One way they can learn more is to go to the Facebook page, Shine the Light Facebook page. What is that again? Yep,
Shine the Light and Heroin was created by Jim Spellman. Krista Quachmani is a mental health clinician at L&M. She's been an amazing force behind that. That's really for public awareness and just a community hub to seek solutions for the opioid crisis.
And if anybody has questions for you personally, whether it be for Stonington Institute or really anything, they can email you. We'll put, what's your email address?
Yep, absolutely. It's my first name, meagan.seacor@gmail.com.
And we'll put a graphic up on the screen too. So that is our show for today. Megan Secor, Community Relations Manager for Stonington Institute. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Sean.
You can see this show and many others on our YouTube sites. So until next time, I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Take care.